and reflections. Mohsin, let's start with the title of the book, because what you've done in the title is invert Sigmund Freud's 1929 seminal essay, which was called Civilizations and Its Discontent. So tell me why you chose that as the title, and then we'll talk about the content while I catch my breath.
First of all, Razia, thank you for coming, and Razia's coming from London, and it's wonderful to have you back in Lahore.
It's great to be here.
And I think in a way, being in a conversation in Pakistan where the other party can't be present because of security concerns feels like the national conversation in this country. Nobody comes to Pakistan, everybody has security concerns and they can't get in or don't want to. The title of the book is, exactly as you say, it plays with a very known title of a book by Sigmund Freud, which I haven't read, to be honest with you. So I didn't engage.
This is great. I love that you haven't read it.
Yes, I didn't engage perhaps with the degree of depth that one would expect with the original work, but I was aware, of course, of it. And in a sense, what triggered it was more the notion of civilizations that we have bandied around these days. So much talk about civilization. So do you belong to a Muslim civilization, or a Western civilization, or a European civilization, or American, or Pakistani civilization? And I increasingly think that the notion is completely crazy, that there's no such thing as any civilization. And we had a wonderful lecture this morning, for those of you who were here, at 11:30, where we were told that actually historically in this part of the world there was a mosaic of people who there were Muslims who were vegetarians and Hindus who had Muslim mothers, and there were all kinds of people in this part of the world, and we hadn't separated so fully into our self-understanding as Muslim is this and Hindu is that, etc., etc. I think the same is true now. So I have friends who are from the Muslim civilization who happen to live in America, and I have friends in Pakistan who maybe don't think of themselves as Muslims but yet live here. So I think the term itself is very suspect, and so the title of the collection raises the idea: why do we manufacture this idea of civilizations? If when we look around in this room, we'll find that there are people here who might pray 5 times a day, or might not pray at all, who might be married, or who might be gay, or who might be whatever, and they're all sitting in Lahore, Pakistan. So I think when we look at the people who make up a civilization, we find that they aren't one thing. And instead, that maybe the notion of civilizations is created in a way to distract us from something, from our discontent, from the idea that in Pakistan we don't get electricity with any reliability, the law and order is terrible, children are being butchered in schools. And that creates obviously a huge amount of discontent. And so what do you give people? You give them, the Muslim civilization is under threat. And that should be what you're concerned about. Or in America, where median incomes are not rising, where young black men are killed by the police for being black, where all sorts of problems exist. American civilization is under threat from these barbarians, and then you forget about the things. So it was really trying to explore that, the idea that we manufacture this notion of civilizations and try to mask our discontent.
I'm sure we'll talk a great deal about this idea that you've now posited about hybridity and the importance of plurality that needs to exist in order for there to be something that is civilized, if perhaps not a civilization, since that's what you're kind of rejecting. But let's go right back to the beginning, because one of the things that you talk about a great deal in different ways in each of these essays or pieces of journalism is your reflections on your relationship to history, that the personal for you became geopolitical very quickly. So for those who haven't read any of the essays or have only encountered a few of them, talk us through that perspective, because it's to do with your location in New York, London and Lahore?
So I think now everyone in the world probably feels that their person has become geopolitical. But that's maybe a more recent phenomenon. It might have been in a generation ago, people thought they lived in their part of the world and things just happened the way they happened. I think in today's 24-hour news cycle and constant warfare and whatever, many of us feel that life has become geopolitical. But in my life in particular, I spent most of my childhood here in Lahore, and then went off to America for about a dozen years and was living in New York in the 1990s, which I now look back at as the blissful Clinton era, you know, when the biggest issue at hand was whether the president had an affair, you know, not whether he had invaded a country under false pretext. And I left New York in about a month shy of September 2001. And then I went to London, and my London life began as the world was changing, as geopolitics was changing. And I had the experience of leaving New York, a city I love very much, and then finding that New York was gone. The city that I had left didn't exist anymore after September 11, 2001. A different New York had come into existence. And then in London, I was living in London, you know, as this fear of migrants generally and Muslims particularly was growing. There were the London tube bombings that took place and the public transport bombings of the subway and the buses in London. A number of other terrorism-related scares in Europe as well. And then the whole climate began to change around this. And I was living in London at this moment when there was, you know, a 1 million-plus person march in Hyde Park against the Iraq War, and still the Iraq War, for Britain's participation occurred. But it became very charged. You know, Britain was by no means aligned. British people were as divided as people anywhere else. But this notion of being someone with a Muslim name, living in Britain, and living in London in particular, began to take on these different contexts. And then I moved back to Pakistan about 6 years ago. You know, perhaps with the logic of, you know, when things are this bad, they can only get better, and which I now realize to be faulty logic. Things probably haven't gotten much better in the last 5 or 6 years. In some ways, it's gotten much worse. Although I do think that there are wonderful things that have come into existence, you know, universities, literary festivals like this, kinds of discourse that we hear, art, many things that are positive in Pakistan, but the overall picture has been grim. And so living in Pakistan, you know, I now live in Pakistan as somebody who is Pakistani and who was born in Lahore and lives in Lahore, but yet it's very much shaped by a half-lifetime living in the United States and the UK. And so I've come home to discover that I'm an outsider at home as well, as I have been in New York and London and other places. And so in that sense, geopolitics has shaped my personal life, and sort of led me to the point of view of thinking that, you know, I might feel a bit of an outsider because of having lived in many different places and having a way of looking at things which is not particularly, you know, an American way or a Pakistani way or a British way. I don't think there is such a thing. But the stereotype of what that thing might be is pretty far from how I view the world. And so that is, it can make one lonely and feel apart. But I, at some point, began to realize that, you know, maybe everyone feels like this. That actually people who've never left their home and have lived in the same place their entire lives. You know, someone who was born in Lahore, let's say 75 or 80 years ago, and lived through partition and saw 2/3 of their neighbors, Hindus and Sikhs, leave. And then lived through the Zia era and saw, you know, things change, and has lived through this moment. You know, who might be sitting in the audience right now, if they look about them at Lahore, they probably feel like they're living in a foreign country, that they haven't moved.
Let's talk a bit more about that.
Yeah.
Because this idea of belonging and being tribal in one's sensibility is, many sociologists, psychologists would argue, is innate in the human condition. So what is it that you're saying that suggests something different, that it's okay to not belong, there's strength and power that resides in being an outsider?
Well, I think that I personally tend to favor groups that have a sort of personal connection. So I think it's possible to belong to the notion of being Pakistani or belong to the notion of being Muslim, but British or Christian or atheist or whatever. But they're very dangerous, these groups. We sort of belong to them just by the accident of where we wound up. Whereas, the belonging to people who have sort of like-minded views on politics or on art, people that we love, that are families and friends, I think it's possible to find belonging in those sorts of groupings and have those groupings cut across, civilizational groupings. You can cheer for different cricket teams and still be, belong together.
You couldn't cheer for India when India's playing Pakistan if you're Pakistan?
I would be probably unwilling to be friends with a Pakistani who chose to do that. But no, I mean, you might be able to. I mean, maybe somebody who appreciates fast ball is a terrible thing that right now India seems to have more fast bowlers than Pakistan does.
Not terrible if you're Indian.
Yes, well, yeah, exactly. Yes, fantastic if you're Indian. I mean, I think, but that said, how many of us who've lived abroad have sat in some strange sports bar or pub in a city like New York at 3 o'clock in the morning, staring at a screen, surrounded by Jamaicans, Indians, Australians, who are there because they're cricket lovers. And in that place, the thing that binds them is their cricket. They're not saying, I can't believe these damn Pakistanis or Australians are also in the same cricket bar or sports bar. So in that sense, yeah, it can transcend that. And I don't think that we necessarily need to suddenly say, I wore a green wig at the Lord's final when Pakistan won the T20 World Cup. So I'm not saying I don't have the slightest bone of nationalist impulse in me. I'm a green wig wearing Pakistani cricket freak. But
and you've chosen to come back and live in a country where many, many things are problematic.
Yeah.
That there are all sorts of fears. They're not just security fears. They're fears to do with your identity if you don't belong to the majority religious group and so on. There's lack of tolerance on all sorts of different levels. So that suggests that there is a very firm rootedness in you that made you come back here as opposed to make your life in London or New York, the two other cities you know well.
That's true. There is a rootedness to this place. But I think, in a way, it's rootedness as something which sort of pulls at you and tugs you and draws you is one thing, and that you derive sustenance from. But to me, that doesn't need to be an exclusionary or a sort of exclusive thing. So if somebody who is, let's say, American, decides to move to Lahore and live here, to me, as far as I'm concerned, they're as much of a Lahori as I am. I don't claim some superior Lahoriness because of my birth or my skin color or my religion. And it's true of Pakistaniness as well. If somebody decides to live here and be of this place, I think that is fine for me. So what I'm wary of is when we start using these terms to exclude people, to say, so you are Pakistani, but if you don't believe this, you're not really a Pakistani, or you're Muslim, but if you don't act in this way, you're not really a Muslim, or you're Muslim and therefore because you're Muslim, you're a threat, which we hear very often in other places. So. And that's why, in a way, this notion of separate civilizations bothers me. Civilizations seem to be very unitary. We can only belong to one. But I think if we only belong to one, then we belong to the human civilization. And beneath that, we belong to many overlapping groupings, which none of us can be called a civilization as the most important grouping. Like right now, what's brought us all together is that we all love books. That's the grouping that matters in this context. And it's not that you are a Sunni or a Shia or something like that.
Let's talk about the different sensibilities that you reflect on in one of the essays. in which you talk about the immediate aftermath of 9/11. And in many Muslim-majority countries, there was anger towards the Americans. And in the United States, there was a genuine, visceral bafflement that these people, those people, the Muslims, they hated us. Why do they hate us? So let's talk a little bit about your perception of that. Not even a dichotomy. It was just a massive separation of perception.
Well, I think we all look out at the world, and we look at the world with massively imperfect eyes. And so it's possible to sit in America and to be told that there are people out there who hate freedom, and everything about us is to do with freedom. And for this reason, they, at some fundamental level, want America to cease to exist, and will do whatever it takes. And if you sit, in some place in America, it might be conceivable that you could say, well, that sort of makes sense. And similarly, you can sit in Pakistan and you can say that, here in Pakistan, we're a bunch of really good people, all my friends are really nice, and the fact that we're blowing each other up and massacring each other and exporting terrorists and doing all kinds of unspeakable things isn't because we're not nice people, because obviously everybody I know is very nice. It's because America or India or somebody else has come in here and done terrible things, and that's why this is all going on. There's this weird instances where terrorists in Pakistan will claim responsibility while somebody on TV is saying that of course it was the foreign man, and you're saying, well, but the terrorists are saying that we did it, and you're saying that so in that context this can come into existence. But the truth of it is that actually we ignore, people prefer to ignore the very real consequences of their own actions. So it is largely Pakistan's fault that Pakistan is a mess now. It's not the fault of every Pakistani, and we haven't been, a well-functioning democracy for most of our history. So, but even if we had been, we share a collective responsibility for where our country is, which is not a good place.
Is that something that you feel is generally a perception, or is that something that's a hard thing to say and not have people say, well, hang on a second, no. External intervention, the way in which that's been manipulated is responsible for so much of Pakistan's difficulties today?
Well, they're both responsible. I think it is difficult, and partly it's because people think if you say that Pakistan is responsible, you are saying that America's foreign policy doesn't matter, or India's foreign policy doesn't matter. Those things do matter. But I sort of take the reverse position of imagining if we say other people are to blame for our situation, then we can't do anything about it. So it's much better to say I'm completely to blame for my situation, because then I have the agency to change the situation.
Hello.
And I think in Pakistan's case, for too long, blaming others for the responsibility of our state has led us into a disastrous situation. And so for that reason, I would say that...
So if it's a hard thing to say, or a difficult, uncomfortable thing to say, what's been the worst reaction that you've had when you said that? Perhaps we'll get it today.
Yes, I hope not to find out. People will sometimes rightly say that I'm wrong. From their point of view, they might think my view of things is wrong. But very often, it's a much more personal thing that you are illegitimate, or you are trying to profit in some way. Vastly overestimating the income that writers get from their books. People think, you're trying to make a lot of money. I'm sort of, if I want to make a lot of money, I would have joined the government.
Staying as a management.
Exactly, staying as a management consultant, yeah. But I think probably the response that I initially found it most difficult to deal with, but now I'm much more comfortable with, was the response of you're not a real Pakistani. That initially used to hit me because of course it was probably true, right? Like, what am I? I'm this weird guy who lived abroad, what the hell do I know? But underneath it all, it's sort of like, well, you write in English, how good is your Urdu, and how deeply versed are you in this, that, and on what authority do you claim to say what you claim? And initially this used to trouble me. You know, it's like being a kid in school, and suddenly everybody in school turns around and says, you're different, and then you're scared. But as I'm 43 now, and as I grew older, I sort of came to the realization that there is no metric of Pakistaniness. That there's no way to assess how Pakistani someone is or isn't. If it's on the basis of their Urdu, well, most people in this country don't grow up speaking Urdu as their first language. And if it's on the basis of speaking some other language which we think of as indigenous to this place, what is indigenous? And in fact, it's even more pervasive that in Pakistan, we constantly seek to delegitimize points of view by saying that people don't belong to a group which is privileged to have a point of view. You could say it's almost like a Brahminical, impulse in a sort of stereotypical understanding of Hinduism, where the Brahmin would pronounce and everybody else would say, yes, well, the Brahmin genetically has permission to pronounce. And we do the same thing in Pakistan, that this person is, is in the pocket of the US lobby, and this person is insufficiently desi, and this person is, whatever, from some other province. They're Punjabi, they can't speak, or they're from... So I sort of began to realize that attack was, that Ahmadi is not a Muslim, or that a Shia is not a, this whole thing that goes on in Pakistan. And then I sort of became comfortable with the idea that I wouldn't accept the notion that you can be delegitimized on the basis of who you are. I think it's much more important to say, just deal with what I'm saying. You don't have to like what I am or think of me as one thing or another. But the words are still the words, and respond to those. And so I've become much more comfortable with that now.
Let's talk a little bit about your choice to actually put these essays together, because up until you decided to do that, you had 3 novels that you had published, all to huge acclaim. After Moth Smoke, you were described as Pakistan's F. Scott Fitzgerald. Very exciting. The London Fundamentalist was made into a film, and How to Get Filthy Rich in Rising Asia. Again, 3 very different novels in terms of ideas in them, the structure. You were emerging as a writer who was willing to experiment in all kinds of ways. So I suppose my question is really about the importance of the journalism, because you've now chosen to collect it in a book. And what that allows you to do that you were less able to do, because I think it still exists in the novels, but what you were less able to do in the fiction.
I mean, I thought that, well, partly, as you write novels and you go and meet people and you speak to people about novels, you realize that, that perhaps people take different things from your novels than you intended. I still remember this guy coming up to me at some literary festival, not in Pakistan, I forget where it was, maybe Australia or Brazil, who knows where it was. And he came up to me and he shook me by the hand and patted me on the back and said, I was so happy when the World Trade Center was destroyed, right on. And I was sort of thinking, okay, well that's an interesting response to the work. And I realized that, people have all kinds of responses. That there was this...
Seriously, I need more of that conversation.
Yeah, but it went downhill from there. The Jews were really the ones who did the World Trade Center thing. It wasn't even... We went very quickly into...
conspiracy.
Yeah, it was a very, very, shall we say, unfun territory. But there was... similarly, there was this young man who came to me at the Karachi Literature Festival many years ago and handed me a letter in which he said that, my friends and I, love your writing. I'm coming to tell you that and give you this letter because we love Moth Smoke, and Moth Smoke we particularly love the sex scenes. And we were very disappointed in the London Fundamentalists because it really wasn't. And we're hoping, as your fans, that you'll keep us in mind when you do your thing. So I thought, this is please stop this increasingly sexless trajectory of your career. Although interesting enough, on the same topic, as a quick aside, I gave a lecture the commencement lecture at CUNY, City University of New York recently. And this one guy that I spoke to an honors class afterwards, this American kid, 18-year-old, first day of university, in his first class, surrounded by 80 other people, said, "This book is just about sex." And everybody else sort of looked at him, "It's just sex." Anyway, and he started going on and on and on. And actually, How to Get Filthy Rich in Resignation didn't strike me or most of the other readers in that class as really being that much. And my agent leaned over and he said, "This class is 3 guys and 15 girls. And by tomorrow, he's going to feel very, very sorry about it. He's the one who comes across as this prudish, But anyway, so you realize that people take different things from your novels. And I thought, it is good to sometimes just say what you think. And particularly in our world in Pakistan, where, it's almost polite to sort of, change the way you express yourself depending on who you're speaking to. It comes from many aspects of our culture. When you speak to somebody elder, you speak in a different way. You might not say certain things, not offend them. And then you speak to somebody with different beliefs than you'll change how you speak. And all of those things in their own context might make sense, but when you add it up to how we, in a way, I think our national conversation is conducted, it seems that very, very rarely does one want to put oneself out there and say, "Look, this is what I believe. Here it is. I stand by it, and that's it." And so I thought I'd like to have a book which does that for me, and just say this is what I think, or at least this is what I thought in different points of view. Some of the essays I don't still think, like the essay on Obama, I feel differently about Obama than I did in 2009.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting because it goes to the heart of what could be argued is not a great idea to put your essays or your journalism all together, because sometimes things can feel slightly dated.
Yeah.
And now here you are admitting that you now have changed your mind about that. So let's talk a little bit about that. Tell us what you made of, because that essay is about, or that piece is about his first speech looking to the Muslim world.
Yes, exactly. And then he was talking about, how the settlements must be stopped and peace must come and this, that, and the other. And I thought, wow, this is great. Of course, nothing happened, and the Israel-Palestinian conflict is much worse than it was then. Israel's become much more intransigent. America's position is even less, equal to the two sides. And but I think the reason to put it down is not the point of the collection of essays is not to say, I'm right about everything, because obviously I'm not. But is to say, here's what I thought. And at different moments, and each of the essays has a date, they span 15 years. And each of them comes from that moment. And so each is a little bit of a time capsule, that at this moment, this is what I believe. And along the journey, some things I think are pretty constant and remain the same. Other things, changed quite a bit. And so it was partly just to put down, which I think is important. It's not in life. The goal isn't to say, okay, well, I figured things out. I'm 43. Here you go, people. Enjoy it and live better now, thanks to me. It's instead to say that we're all trying to figure things out, and writing is an attempt to do that. It's a journey, and coming along, on that journey is maybe more insightful to a human being than just reading one thing now. Although, of course, that can also be, it's an equally valid approach. But I liked the fact that over time, certain fallibilities and mistakes would be revealed, because they're there, even in the most recent essays. I've probably gotten some things very wrong. The other part of it was, in a way, it's a desire to be known. When one writes, and why are you writing? And it's to connect in a way with other human beings and to be, to somehow have a bond. And I thought putting this journey of essays out was a way, to be known by the readers who would read these essays. And the book is dedicated to my kids. And my daughter is 5 and my son is almost 3. And I thought, that hopefully one day they can come to this and say, well, when our dad was 43 years old, this is what he'd been thinking. And so
it's very unusual to have a writer say that they want to be known. I think it's very unusual. I spend a lot of my professional life talking to writers. And I say that, I suppose, because there is detachment when you're writing novels in particular, that you do this as a solitary activity, it's then sent out into the world and it has a life of its own in another relationship that's fairly solitary, pretty solitary. You know, you're in a room, you're a reader, it's you and the book. And there's something the alchemy of that is very special if you are an avid reader, or even if you're not an avid reader. And so this idea that you welcome being known, I think is a very unusual one for a novelist in particular.
It's a funny, you're absolutely right, it is a bit weird. Partly because I'm deeply private actually in a way. I don't like to necessarily meet too many readers, and I try to avoid, I don't often go to literary festivals anymore, but I think what started to happen now is that writer, living on their own, quietly publishing a novel in solitude, is almost a figure of myth now. But the reality of publishing today is when you publish a book, you're hauled out, and you give a whole bunch of interviews, and you're supposed to be on Facebook and Twitter, and you're supposed to be building your brand presence and doing all this stuff to promote yourself and to promote your work, which feels incredibly false, much of the time. I mean, you have some very good interviews and some very good conversations, and you have other things that you're doing, and you think, why am I doing this? This is not really very honest what I'm engaged in. I'm trying to seem interesting on something else so that attention is attracted to the thing I'm selling. It's very weird. So we're forced into the world now, I think, writers. And I'm not sure the option exists to really be behind it. Maybe it does. I think some writers probably still do it, but not too many in my generation manage to do it. And so in that case, I'd kind of rather be doing something like this, where I try to actually communicate what I care about, instead of trying to hook you with a constant stream of interesting and or cool and or whatever catchy asides that generate traffic to my and or Amazon's website. But that said, I think that there's almost a split between two different things. There's this writer, I guess, who I suppose is me, and there's then me. And when I'm actually writing fiction, I'm not 100% sure that I am me. I mean, it's a kind of a weird experience, sort of like when you're dancing. If you're dancing, you have a really good time, and you're, in that moment, feeling quite unself-conscious. Who is this person who's dancing like crazy? Is it you? Yeah, it's you, but it's you in a different place. And whereas the non-fiction, I think, is something else. The non-fiction is much more me as I normally am. So while I'd like to, I suppose, maintain a certain degree of quite a strong degree of privacy, I also, I'm desperate to sort of, touch and be touched by those human beings, and that's what I meant by being known.
I've got no idea what time it is because I walked in completely breathless.
20 past.
Excellent. Okay, well, I've still got some more questions before I open it up to. Actually, let's return to talking about Pakistan, because one of the things that we've talked about it so much in this conversation, but I'm most interested in hearing about your thoughts that you see Pakistan as a test bed, almost, for a pluralistic society that almost needs, in a world that needs to be more plural, in a global world where we are so aware of the connections that we make with other people, and yet this is still a country which continues to quote from the book, wields its knife upon itself.
Yeah.
And I think that idea of a country that continues to do that and doesn't necessarily learn from the mistakes that it's making or the mistakes that are thrust upon it, whichever perspective you take, for that country to be the test bed for a pluralistic society, for me, represented a huge amount of hope. And it's clear from the essays that you are an incredibly hopeful person, even though you recognise the despair that Pakistan is very frequently thrust into. So let's talk a little bit about that idea that this country has an opportunity to be something different.
Well, I think that all over the world, societies are evolving into more complex, multi-ethnic, multi-religious places, whether that's through immigration or demographic shift or just generational change or whatever it is. So we have to find a way for different people to live together. And the Pakistani model of if you are different and you can afford it, get the hell out, is not a very good model. It doesn't work for Pakistanis. 5 million, I think, have left Pakistan and live abroad now. But it doesn't work for people who are here either. And Pakistan is a relatively poor country. So I think in a country like Pakistan, which has got so much diversity, the languages in Pakistan, Punjabi in Pakistan is as big as German is in Germany. And, Sindhi is as big as, So all of this linguistic diversity, and then the religious diversity, because we say that 97% of Pakistanis are Muslims, but we don't bother to look closely enough to imagine what is the belief system that individual human being has. Yes, it falls in the rubric that they might call or might not call, but perhaps do call Muslim. But then if you drill down into it, there's such a diversity of practices. You'll see people doing all kinds of things. And so there's religious diversity, even if it's not apparent. There is linguistic diversity. There's you could say racial diversity, or at least ethnic diversity. There's a whole pigmentocracy in Pakistan, with different skin colors and features denoting different things. So it's a very, very diverse place with 200 million people of all different types. If societies like this on Earth can figure out how to live with themselves, things will be okay. But if societies like this can't do it, I think the future, not just for Pakistan, but everyone, it starts looking quite bleak. And so I think it's very important what happens in Pakistan. In a way, if you think the battle for the rights of Muslim minorities in Europe is being fought in Pakistan, on whether or not we defend the rights of Christian minorities living here. You can't disentangle these things. So in that sense, I think if Pakistan can emerge as a place that is able to allow some degree of safeguarding for its people, allowing them to be whatever the hell they want to be, which is what we're not allowed to be in Pakistan, we can find our way out. And that's why I think Pakistan is particularly important. Obviously, I also live here. But, as we heard this...
And you have a vested interest in
yeah.
the family, you made your life here.
Absolutely. And I think it can be, actually. It's in a way, there's a kind of foreign policy obsession in the ruling elite in Pakistan, which has made so much of Pakistani policy about what is its ramifications for foreign policy. The Pakistan-Indian conflict, the Saudi-Iranian rivalry, the American-Chinese great game. And I'm sort of of the point of view, who cares about any of that stuff? That's, what do we need to do here? And of course, that is partly to do with having a national history in which you have a predominance by, a national security apparatus which exists, to think in that way. So that's part of it. And part of it is, many other things, including an utter terror, among wealthy and more powerful Pakistanis of what people who are less wealthy and less powerful might actually want, which makes it sort of very happy to be complicit with whoever's running this place.
So what in your view then needs to shift? What can be the game changer which will allow the majority in Pakistan to say, we need to reflect not on what's happening outside. Obviously, there are connections between external pressures and the external relationships that Pakistan has made historically, and what happens in the country itself. But what paradigm shift needs to take place in order for Pakistan to feel that it is on the cusp of being a test case for plurality, tolerance, civilization. I know we're coming back to the
Yeah.
beginning of you rejecting that as the umbrella term for the way in which we all should live. But I wonder what you think needs to happen, because for many people on the outside, you could argue, killing more than 130 children could be that red line, could have been that red line, should have been that red line.
I think I'm okay with civilization if it's something we all can belong to. I just have a problem with civilization if we start dividing the world up into these opposing, neat, civilizations that are different from each other. But in Pakistan's case, I think that there's a whole bunch of things. One is that, and they all interrelate, so it's hard to pick which one comes first. But I think in Pakistan we suffer from a collective Stockholm syndrome. The Stockholm syndrome was that this rich heiress was kidnapped and came to identify with her kidnappers and thought they were pretty good guys. And it occurs, psychologists tell us, because when you're so frightened of somebody, feeling that you are aligned with them allows you to be less frightened and to feel that you have agency again. And I wanted to be with these kidnappers because they actually want to liberate the poor of the world. And they stand for, toppling the capitalist hierarchy. That's what's happened, I think, in Pakistan with regard to these sort of militant extremist groups. It's that we are so frightened of them that we have started to articulate our thoughts in ways that try to say that there's some good to what they're doing. They're fighting America and Afghanistan, and they're trying to balance out with India. We're looking for reasons to think that our kidnappers are actually on the side we want to believe in, because the reality that we have been kidnapped is so much more frightening. So how do you undo that? For me, it's a couple of things. One is that it would help if the police were on the side of the kidnappers. And so the Pakistani state needs to be very firm on saying, look, none of these extremist outfits are actually good guys. And let's just make a choice and do that. It feels like we are closer to that than we were a year ago, at least to me. But we're certainly nowhere close to being all the way there. But I think if you see the state, the army, the police, politicians begin to sort of take that line, and there might be a lessening of fear and allowing people to think for themselves about what they really feel. And so what appears to be a country very much divided actually will reveal itself to be not all that divided at all, it's just scared. That's one thing which I think. And then as far as civil society is concerned, there's the other side part of it, which is simply continuing to live your life and conducting yourself in a way that you think is decent. Is the other part of that fight, and everybody is doing that in their own way, just going to work, going to school, dealing with human people, human beings, and
try not to be scared.
Yeah, try not to behead everybody. I think it's pretty sort of low threshold. If you avoid beheading people or asking people to be beheaded, you're probably on the right side.
I've got some more questions, but I'm going to open it up to the floor because I've already on this. I don't know if we have microphones or whether we're just going to allow people to. Yes, come in the front here.
Hello. Just a comment to the last question that you had about what do we do. We live in Boston.
So hold the microphone.
Can you hear me now? Yes, good. Okay, so we live in Boston, near Boston, and we've had 4 vigils since this happened. And then the Charlie Hebdo and all that stuff that happened. So on 16th in Karachi, we flew from there. We were at a vigil on the 16th with the Brown Nasser, the guy who stood up to the Red Mosque.
Yeah.
The more kids died in Peshawar than there were people standing there, over there. So I think it's a serious amount of desensitization. I mean, people, I don't know if they're scared or they don't care anymore. We were more, it would seem, that we have more anxiety living abroad for our family here than our family living here. Their anxiety. Because they should accept how many million people came up in Paris when Charlie Hebdo thing happened. That should happen. These dharma things happen in front of the PTI or MPM or whatever. They pull up 3 million people, 1,500,000 people were a snap. They couldn't do that over here. I'm like, so that was very, very disappointing. So I don't know what's wrong. Is it scared or is it lack of sensitivity?
Well, I think it does come back to the same point that we were talking about before, which is that I don't believe that people are desensitized. I mean, they're somewhat desensitized, but I think that the school massacre certainly cut through many people's desensitization. And there were marches, and I attended some, but they weren't millions of people by any stretch of the imagination. But look at the context in which these marches are occurring. In Paris, the state is saying that the marchers are on the right side. They shall be protected in their march, etc., etc. In Pakistan, the state continues to have militant groups or capable of killing people like these marchers semi on its payroll. So in Pakistan, the idea I mean, in a way, civil societies exist inside a country where the organs of power, police, the army, etc., don't draw their authority from that society necessarily, but rather impose their authority. So it's a lot harder in a way to have a million-person march. And we've seen what happens in big marches in Pakistan. Bombs go off very often. So, now this is not to excuse people that they shouldn't go out and protest and whatever, but I think that it's a very different thing. And of course we had instances after this attack, where people did march, and they did wind up getting beaten up or roughed up or have, these sort of counter things happen. So for example, it's very easy for the police or the local government to say that, we can't guarantee the security of these protesters or this literary festival or this whatever. Yet, nobody seems to think that the fact that we're guaranteeing the security of all of these, rabid killers who are living all around us is a problem. The state has to radically change how it orients itself to that. Now, is it doing that? Is that changing? I think a bit, but it's going to have to, because the killers are coming from the state. They're coming for the army, they're coming for the children of the army, they're coming for the politicians, they're coming for everybody. So there's not really a way out, although I think in possibly resisting that way out as much as we can. But I wouldn't completely lose heart from those small turnouts. I don't think they do reflect people's opinions or views. I also think, in a way, it can be dangerous, when one is abroad, to imagine that people back home or in Pakistan, lack some kind of sensitivity or sensibility or humanity. It isn't the case. So I would look for different explanations as to why we're not seeing the same kind of marches, than the people just don't care.
There's a hand that's gone up right at the back there.
I think, can you hear me? Or?
Yes.
You kind of talked about identity and either being able to or not being able to identify yourself as a Pakistani or living in the UK or the US. Do you feel that you're liberated as a result of that, or do you feel that you are more isolated, not having to identify with a specific tribe, if you can call it that?
Okay, so for those who didn't hear, the question was about whether he feels more liberated from not having to identify himself with a particular group. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's an interesting thing. I think it can be liberating in a way to not completely identify with one group. You are liberated in a way. I think people who cut across boundaries, the handicap, of course, of that is the feeling of, do I really belong? But what you gain is the idea of seeing that other people maybe in some ways just like you. I was talking to one of the delegates who has come here from California and Beirut. He divides his time, Ravi Al-Madin, and he was saying that when Syrian refugees came to Beirut, and there's more than 1 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon right now, that the local cancer charity refused to treat Syrian refugees who had cancer because those funds were earmarked for the Lebanese cancer victims. But interestingly enough, the gay rights organizations of Lebanon were totally okay with the idea of taking on and protecting the rights of gay Syrian refugees. And I think in that is something, right? That a group that maybe feels itself perhaps marginalized or less of an outsider is capable of having more empathy for people who are also marginalized and have an outsider. And in that sense, there is a liberation.
A hand just here and then one right at the back again.
Hello, I'm here. I'm intrigued with your readings. I've been reading your books since you started writing. And this book about your essays have shown the maturity. And I hope that you have opened a window for the young children to look at problems from your perspective, which gives them a more broader view of the problems that you're facing. So do you think as a writer, as a person who is well-traveled, that your window and your perception has opened up more windows for people who are living here?
I would say that in a place like Pakistan, where expression has been so repressed and constrained and made small, that just trying to say what you think actually opens up space, and doing it publicly opens up space. And so in that sense, not just me, but lots of other people trying to express things that are a little bit different from what the mainstream narrative tends to be, maybe does open up space. I hope it does. It's always nice when I meet people at festivals who say that, that I read one of your books and it made me decide to be a writer, or made me think that I could be a writer. And what they're saying is not they want to write books like me, but they're saying that, well, I'm seeing that you're doing it, and so then I can do it in a way. And so in that sense, I think that's very important. As far as young people are concerned, is that there should always be, visible avenues where they can say, regardless of what this person is saying, the fact that people are saying stuff means I've got something to say and I should be able to say it too. And I think that's very important here because so much speech is completely repressed in Pakistan.
So I think the hand went up just there, and I think we've got time for one more just here. Oh, do you have a microphone in your hand? Okay. You're at a huge advantage.
So I have two questions.
Maybe use the microphone.
I have two questions, actually three. But
Greedy! That's so greedy!
First I read your book, Discontent and Civilizations, and I felt that if the entire content revolved around the feeling of discontent, do you think that Pakistan can reach a stage where it can be liberated enough, stable enough, to remove this feeling of discontent from it, if it can? And
Okay, now that's a big question.
yeah.
So let him try and answer that one. and then we'll go to the gentleman there who's got his hand up and the woman just there.
It's a, can Pakistan remove its discontent? I don't know. I would say that, the arts and spirituality have played a very important part in this part of the world, and probably every part of the world, in people being able to make sense of their lives and the world around them. And we live in a society in which the arts and sincere expression of spirituality, whatever direction that happens to go in, face huge obstacles. And so we are becoming, in a way, more and more tormented by the enforced hypocrisy of the official line of our state, that this is what being a Muslim means, this is what being a Pakistani means. But you just have to look into the recent past, I mean, the biggest shrine, the most attended venue in Lahore, isn't the IMAX cinema, and it isn't even really a mosque, it's Data Sahib Darbar, and that's basically a writer who, 1,000-ish years ago, talked about sort of finding an individual path to a relationship with the universe. And, you have to open up those kinds of conversations and allow people to find their own way to address this kind of discontent, this shoveling people down hypocritical, false things, which, I mean, they're not false to everybody, but the official line cannot be what individual spirituality and individual morals are based on. And so I think breaking down the official line is very important if we want to be less discontented.
Because I was late, I'm gonna exercise just 3 more minutes, and so we can have 3 more questions. So the gentleman there, and then here, and then there. And then really short questions, really short answers, Mohsin.
Thank you, ma'am. I just want to take a liberty of making a point because this is somehow related to my question. You said that pluralism is the lifeline for Pakistan. Pakistan can be the best case for it. And like diversity is a strong point, which is our strong point as well as our weak point too. But the point, and when we say that it's a weak point, the parties to the crime are secular orthodoxy and the religious orthodoxy. These are the 2 main organs that are making this pluralistic society into a weak point. What's your take on this? Who is contributing more, not letting us capitalize on this pluralistic fabric of our society? Is it a religious orthodoxy?
Yeah.
Is it secular?
Sure. I mean, I think, living in Pakistan, it's difficult for me to see the power of the secular orthodoxy here. In the sense that I can understand how, if one says that actually the legal system here is descended from a British framework and is not necessarily rooted in Islamic law or something like that, one might say, okay, there's a kind of secular orthodoxy, but the reality is that we don't live in a secular country at all. If you're not a Muslim, you can't be president of Pakistan. If you're Ahmadi, you can't say you're Muslim on your passport. If you're, X, Y, or Z, I mean, we don't live in a secular society. So I don't think that there is a secular orthodoxy. But what there might, I think, is certainly there are powerful and wealthy people in Pakistan who use secular language to entrench and justify their continued status as very powerful and wealthy people. I don't think it's a secular orthodoxy, actually. I think it's the misuse of secular liberal values as rhetoric by people who are completely illiberal. But I think that's, for me, the distinction.
And who is contributing more?
Well, I don't think the secular orthodoxy is contributing, but I would agree with you that the complete bastardization of secularism and liberalism by actors who might themselves be feudal or non-tax-paying corporate interests has deeply harmed this country and maybe created an environment in which this religious orthodoxy could rise. But that said, for me personally, the religious orthodoxy is by far the more dangerous threat.
You've got a microphone now.
You can hear me? Alright, the question is that it's me asking the question here. Hello?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Alright, my question is that you have rightly put it, you have depicted the pluralism in Pakistan and everything. And European fundamentalism is a very strong expression of your, anti-American feelings prevailing in Pakistan. And you have almost justified the feelings which are prevailing in Pakistan, the Muslims of Pakistan and everything. So do you think that you have contributed to the point of view of Pakistan while in this novel, by presenting it, to the world at the international level? Do you think there is sort of you have pacified the feelings, or you have served as a moderator between Pakistan and West?
I mean, I think that, again, I don't think that there really is sort of this Pakistan and the West, which are these unified things that are having conversation. But to your point, people do read militant fundamentalists here and abroad. It's on many university, syllabus here in Pakistan actually, and I often meet students from all over the country, from Peshawar to Karachi, who read it. So it's being debated, and I think these students are not saying, this writer thinks that Chinggis is a good guy, that you should go back and grow a beard. I think that the students understand that that's not the heart of the book, that it actually is teasing up a different conversation. But to give you an example of what people abroad think about it, again, they think different things, people who read it. But when I go on university campuses, and I'm going to be speaking at a university campus on Tuesday in Philadelphia, and I've probably done maybe 50 or 100 of these university lectures over the years, and the students wind up being very divided. They wind up having a big debate. What was this guy thinking, and what was he about, and whatever. And in a way, that was much more my goal. My goal wasn't to be a propagandist for Pakistan, to say that Pakistanis are really good people, or they're not good people, or they're terrorists, or they're not terrorists. My goal was to say, this is complicated. Don't accept a simple solution. Think about it. And in that sense, I wouldn't say that it has improved or harmed Pakistan's image, and it's a tiny thing, a book, it's not still. But maybe for some people, it has helped them think in a bit more complicated way about Pakistan. And for me, I think that's much more my job than to tell them that Pakistan is this or that, because the truth is, I don't know what Pakistan is either. But I know it's a lot more complicated than what we discuss it as.
It's a fantastic way in which to end. And everyone who stayed in the audience, you've got to make up for all those who left. Extra loud applause.
Thank you.